it's so good to see you.
Hi, good to see you.
So, as you know, today is Mental Health Action Day. So, I wanted to jump on with you and just talk through all things mental health. So, why don't you tell everybody your involvement with Breaking the Chains Foundation?
So I have been involved with Breaking the Chains now for, oh man, like 5 years. I've lost track of time because it's been amazing and it just, it's now like integrated as a part of my life. But yeah, I started off as a board member, or I started off as an ambassador and now I'm a board member. And yeah, I'm just, very passionate about the foundation. And obviously, I had my own eating disorder journey and mental health journey throughout my entire life. And so, being a part of something that, allows for community through art, as an artist myself, it's been the most amazing thing. And I found some of my most amazing friends and family through it.
And as everybody knows who's hopefully watching this, I have also been a part of Breaking the Chains Foundation for a very long time since its inception. I too started as a celebrity ambassador and then moved on to the board and have dealt with my own mental health issues as well, which is what we're here to talk about. So, do you want to just give like a brief overview of what your journey has looked like?
Oh yeah, I mean it's been a roller coaster here and back. I mean, I feel like through life has its ups and downs and its trials and tribulations. As a kid, I was very anxious, I'm a very type A personality. I set very high standards for myself. And, even though my parents go, it's okay, Courtney, you don't have to. And I'm like, no, it's not, like it was like something in my brain. And so I think because of that, created obviously a lot of anxiety. And then, through loss and grief of, people in my life, or things that didn't go as planned. I had, depression for a couple times in my life. It kind of, like I said, it's been a roller coaster, and it's really just allowed me to realize how important taking care of myself is. I have a tendency to be a people pleaser and want to make sure everyone else is okay. And I have learned that the most important relationship I will ever have is with myself, because without me, I can't be there for anyone else. And and then doing the things that I need to do for me, whether it's physically, emotionally, mentally, or, having dogs and having emotional support in any way. But yeah, it's been a journey. What about
Yeah.
you?
Yeah. I mean, I feel the same. I grew up having anxiety, but not really knowing it. And it didn't really manifest itself until several years ago as I was entering my late 20s, which is just a hard time in life in general. And that's when I got my diagnosis with an anxiety disorder, which really kind of changed my life and did really change my relationship with myself. And I think until I realized that I had something going on that needed to be talked about, I didn't fully know myself and I didn't fully love myself. And I didn't fully understand that that relationship, like you said, with yourself is the most important one that you will ever have. But it really took me going on that journey and taking that action to get there. And that's what I really want to talk about on, Mental Health Action Day is what does taking action mean to you in your life?
Man, I mean, taking action to me is, a path to healing. It's a path to understanding ourselves and the world around us. It's the path to really deepening our relationship with ourselves first and foremost, but as a human and with other humans, as a society, because we all have our mental health struggles, our mental health triumphs. There's so many things to our journey, and to be able to take action and whatever that looks like for you, it's very individual. It's each person is so different what they need, and um the the tools in their toolbox, differ so greatly. And so yeah, I mean being able to take action, I think, is the first step. And sometimes it's small, sometimes it's a big step, a small step, and sometimes honestly it's even just an awareness, even if it's a standing still and going, you know what, let me think about something new to do. Like I said, there's so many ways around it, but it is absolutely essential.
It really is. And I think that for me, taking action also means having accountability. And, sometimes you need to be gentle with yourself and sometimes you need to be a little tougher with yourself. And I think what I realized when I was going through my anxiety journey, and even I'm still learning about today, is that it doesn't matter how bad my anxiety gets. If I just sit in it, it's never going to change. My anxiety will never go away unless I take action, unless I do something about it. And that was a really big deal for me to learn because I think like through my later 20s, early 30s, I got to this place of just wishing that things would be better and
Mhm.
just like hoping and praying for the day that I woke up and my anxiety was gone. But it really took looking inward and understanding that I did need to ask for help and I did need to take action, that that was the only way that I was going to get to the other side of this. And I think, you know, realizing that you have to ask for help is a really big and personal thing. I'm curious for you, when did you realize that you needed to take that next step?
Man, I feel like asking for help has been the hardest thing for me in my life. It's still something I'm learning. I've always been very independent, and just feeling like, I don't know, like either it was a burden to ask for help, or like I didn't want someone to think something was wrong with me, or like just whatever mental, you know, script I was going through of all the reasons why I didn't need to ask for help. So I think for me, I ended up I ended up on an anxiety medication when I was younger, and um, but I didn't really know much about. I wasn't aware of being able to go to therapy. I mean, I knew that it was there, but I just didn't have a relationship with it. And so I think throughout the years of being on that medication, it made me realize like I wasn't really doing anything to take action to help myself through it. Like I just was, and I started to realize like I went from being in my late teens to my, then early 20s, and realizing, as a young adult, like I want to be able to take this into my own hands. It was like the one thing in my life that I was kind of giving up to something else, and not really doing anything about it myself. Um, and so I think that was really the first moment where I was like, you know what, I need to do something. I went to my parents. I said, I want to get off of this. And I'm not advocating that for, everyone's journey is different. Some people need it. But for me, I realized I just had gotten on it at a late, my late teens, and just went, I'm just going to stay on this. And one day I went to my parents and said, I really want to learn how to do this on my own to see if it's something that I really do need. And then I can get back on it if I need to. So it was around when I was like 22 that I finally had this moment where I said, mom, dad, like I'm going to get off of this. And I worked at a job where my two bosses were actually also therapists. So I think that was also, it just was a beautiful engulfment in this moment of all these people around me going, hey, we're here to support you and here's the tools that you need. So that was my biggest moment of realizing that, I think I want to try and do this on my own. And thankfully for me and my journey, I was able to do that and really learn myself. And it's not always easy to look
No.
at yourself and go like, okay, you have a tendency to be a little bit more anxious. You have a tendency to overthink. I have a very sensitive stomach. So I also learned that like if I
Same,
eat
girl.
something
Same.
wrong, is it crazy? Do you experience this? Like I eat something for me that doesn't agree with me. My stomach's like, no, I'm like immediately red flag. It gives me anxiety
Yeah.
because obviously your vagus nerve, and then you have, your stomach acid. It's like, oh, that's the technical stuff. But like
Yeah.
I didn't realize that connection.
And
How
it's huge. Oh, yeah. I am a big advocate of the anxiety pooping. Sometimes you gotta anxiety poop to feel better. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. I mean, oh my gosh, it's crazy. Like the mind and gut connection is so essential to understand because it
Yes.
really is such a big deal. And I feel like I just didn't understand that connection, but eventually I started to learn it. And then I ended up having a couple years ago, I have asthma, and a couple years ago, I was on an anxiety medication, and I had made my choice that I wanted to try and become all natural in everything that I did. And so I really wanted, but the last thing was my asthma medicine. I didn't even realize whatever I was on, I was having an allergic reaction to it, and it caused me to have peripheral neuropathy, and that was really difficult because it affected I went to my neurologist. I couldn't figure it out. Like my whole left side of my body I was anxious all the time.
Yeah.
I was dizzy. It started to affect I was having really bad vertigo. The whole left side of my body went completely numb. Like it was really strange, or it would like my eye would cross in, which like it still does sometimes. Like it just affected my nerves, and was in and out of the hospital, and no one could figure out what was wrong with me. They tested me for lupus and MS and all this stuff. And but I'd never had anxiety like that in my life. And finally my neurologist was like, it's because it's affecting your vagus nerve and you're getting peripheral neuropathy. And so that was this moment where, that was probably 3 years ago. And not a lot of people knew. A couple people on set knew because I had a couple moments where I was like, I needed to like sit down or I'd randomly get nauseous. But given what I do for a living and what you do for a living, like our bodies are our vessels,
Totally.
like
Yep.
we bring in other stories and our bodies have to tune to whatever
Yep.
frequency that is so we can emit it. And sometimes our bodies don't understand the difference. Our brain can go, this isn't real, but our body goes,
Oh
wait,
yeah.
it's not. And so in that moment, that was where I really was like, okay, I have to take care of myself
Yes.
because my body is not okay right now. And ever since then, that's been like my number one, first and foremost. I kind of had moments of going, oh, take care of myself. And now I'm like, no, like
Yeah.
you have to, or your body's just, it's not
Which is
fair.
also something I think that comes with age, right? Is like, you spend so much of your 20s just like doing whatever you want and assuming that your body's going to be okay. And then you start to get older and you realize, like, no, you actually do have to care about this. And that's also something that I wish a lot of young people understood more, especially like the mind gut connection. Because when I realized I needed help, it was because I had hit rock bottom. And I applaud you for being like 22 and being like, I want to make a change because it didn't hit me until a lot later. But I was in and out of the hospital as well. I was unable to eat. My anxiety was so bad. I was just spinning all day long. I couldn't keep anything down. Like I just had no idea that my gut and my brain were so connected. And I think that if I had been educated on that, if people had talked about mental health more when I was younger, maybe it wouldn't have been so bad. Right. And I think that's the message that we at Breaking the Chains Foundation want to spread anyway, is that like prevention is possible. If we do change the conversation, if we do break these chains, we can educate people. I mean, I don't know if you know this fact, Courtney, but do you know that the average amount of years between the onset of symptoms of a mental health disorder and the treatment of that mental health disorder is about 11 years,
I
which
believe
is
it.
very true for me.
That, yeah. I'm well, yeah. I mean, I would say even for me, I mean, I was super young, like and I grew up as a competitive dancer and I was like, I love dancing. It's like my life, but I was terrified. I don't know. Like I would go out on stage and I get so nervous and
Yeah.
I eventually quit and I hate that but I did it because I was afraid because my anxiety. And so, yeah, I believe that because that was 11 years to say when I was 22. Yeah, I was like 11.
Have you found that you have had to fight against any negative stigmas in your journey in, healing?
I definitely think it's more acceptable now. Thankfully, a lot of people are talking about, you know, their capacity for emotion and where their mind is at any given point in time and what their triggers are to set them off to having, you know, uh, anxiety or depression or whatever it might be. I definitely think when I was younger, yeah, I think it was, and I don't even necessarily know if it was like a stigma that was impressed upon me by the public or it was my perception of what they would think. I
Sure.
think that was really more what
Yeah.
it was. I kept it to myself. I didn't want to tell people that I, you know, was nervous or, I mean, again, like I would drink like a grape soda and get anxiety. And I thought, I'm not going to tell my girlfriends because they're going to think I'm crazy. Like, but in
Yeah.
my mind, it's like, this
Yeah.
is real.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that is so true. I mean, 1 in 5 adults in the US experience a mental illness, and we are all kind of bred to believe that that's crazy. And what gets me all the time, something that I think about, is that we're taught from a very young age to take care of the rest of our body, right? Eat healthy, drink a lot of water. If you fall down and you break your leg, you're going to go to the doctor. If your stomach hurts, you're going to go to the doctor. But why are our brains excluded from that? Why are our brains this thing that, oh, if you have a brain problem, you're just crazy. But if you break your leg, you're totally fine. That is something that I do not understand. And I had to really get over that when I started my journey with therapy. And I didn't even tell people, my friends, that I was going to therapy at first because I didn't accept that part of myself that needed it. And I was so connected to that perfectionism part, that part that felt like there's my dog, that part that felt like it wasn't okay to not
Yeah.
be okay. Right. And to have to fight against that and understand, like, no, it actually is okay to not be okay. And there's a lot of people who aren't okay, and we can talk about it. That was a big mental block that I had to get over.
Well, yeah, and like you just said, like going to the doctor, like you're basically going to someone that has knowledge on a topic that, or at least tools on a topic that you know nothing about or you didn't go to school for, right? Like you go to, I don't know, like a urologist or cardiologist, right? Like it's no different going to a therapist who has knowledge, infinite knowledge, especially certain ones, they have specialty knowledge on different aspects of the brain. Like it's in the same category. And yet, yeah, there is a stigma behind it, like, oh, you're in therapy, you must have something wrong with you. Well, I gotta say, like, I had a pretty great childhood. Like my parents are wonderful and like
Yeah,
my family's wonderful. Yeah, we went through our own traumas, of death of, loved ones or, whatever, life happens, right? Um,
sure.
but I just was, I think, inbred since I was young to kind of have that hyperactive mind and body. And even if someone didn't have a great childhood, like it doesn't matter why you feel the need to go seek somebody, whether it's a sounding board or you really do need care, whatever it might be, it's okay. And
Yes. And I
yeah,
think that's important what you just said, is even if it's a sounding board, right? Because I think people do still have this stigma of, if you're in therapy, something must be really bad. But the truth is, a lot of us just don't have the right person to talk to. Like, for example, I love and adore my husband, and he'll listen to me talk about anything I want, but sometimes he's not the person, right? Or I love my best friends, but sometimes they don't have the expertise that I need, right? And it may not be that you're having a big problem in your life or that you have experienced so much deep trauma. You just need someone to talk to, and that is okay.
yeah.
We need to normalize just talking more, because we are taught to bottle up our feelings. We are taught to just say we're okay. And it's hurting us all.
Absolutely. And I feel like sometimes when we do talk to people in our lives, like they have their own history, right? They have their own perspective of what they're where they're coming from. So sometimes if you're talking to them about something, it could trigger them or make them feel a specific way. So that's why it is good to have different people, because sometimes if you go talk to someone, like a therapist or someone that may not have experience, or sometimes you just need someone to, um,
Someone neutral.
someone, yeah, exactly. That's what I was looking for. Yeah, someone neutral, because it allows you to then be able to look at yourself and
Yes.
be able to figure out for yourself where you are. And acceptance. That's another thing I was going to say earlier, is like I think acceptance has been one of the biggest things for me. Like accepting situations, accepting how I am, accepting what I need. And sometimes it's hard to say, like, you know what? Some, like when I was younger, I was like, oh, I was afraid to be alone. Now I crave it, but I had to sit through that uncomfortability of going,
Yes.
I'm afraid of this. And now all of a sudden I'm like, actually, this is pretty great. Like,
Yeah, because when you work through it, you fall in love with yourself in a different way,
yeah.
right? And I think that acceptance is such a big deal. And, going through my own anxiety journey, I kind of touched on this earlier, but I used to think like I wanted to live in a world where my anxiety was gone. I wanted to live in a world where there was no anxiety, where I was healed completely from this thing. But I really had to realize that that's not what's going to happen, and that I have to accept that this part of myself exists, and that at the end of the day, even when it feels really like my world is crashing down, that anxiety is still just a part of me. It is not my whole self. And if I can accept that part of myself and love that part of myself instead of hate that part of myself, I'm going to have a way easier time dealing with it.
Absolutely. Have you found that, like, through this journey for you, you've gained more self-respect and you've strengthened your boundaries through each moment that you get through with your anxiety?
Oh my gosh, absolutely. I mean, I've learned more about myself by just getting into therapy and dissecting the way my brain works. I learned stuff about myself that I never even expected to learn. I was able to go back even into my childhood and pick apart things that I never even would have realized were contributing to my mental health today. And it did it's made me take a step back and be a little bit more gentle with myself.
Yes.
Right? And forgive myself a little bit more because so many of the traumas that happen to us in our lives, big or small, they all do matter, right? And I did such a good job of pushing it all under the rug that when I finally opened it all up, and I definitely experienced the thing that a lot of people experience when you go to therapy, which is it gets really hard before it gets better. But I really did learn to respect myself through the process. And now I got no problem setting a boundary if I need to do it. And I don't care if it makes anybody else uncomfortable because I got there. I did that work.
Yeah, no, completely. And I think that's definitely where I am now. Like, it's one of the biggest things I've learned. Like, I've blurred boundaries my whole life. I've
Yeah.
allowed people to trample all over me and go, it's okay because of, and I could empathize going, well, they're doing this because maybe this in their past or this happened. It's okay. I love them anyway. Instead of realizing that in the name of empathy, I can still love that person, but I also have to protect myself. Like, just because this happened to you and this is maybe a reason why you're doing it doesn't make it okay. And I
Totally.
that also helped me not have as much anxiety when I started to realize that, like, I actually can support and contribute to my own safety on my own, because we all have a little kid inside of us, right? And then we grow up to be adults, and it's like when I started to realize when I would get nervous or get anxious about something or overthink, I would stop. I learned to, like, be still. Stillness was the greatest thing that I learned. I'm not great at it, but I'm so much better at it now, where if I could stop and listen and go, it was almost like this little voice. It almost is that little kid inside of you that goes like, "Hey, I don't really feel safe right now," or I don't like this for me, But then the adult would almost, like, my adult self almost wouldn't take care of that little kid inside me and go, "It's okay. I've either dealt with this before, I can handle it." Or it's not that big of a deal. Instead of realizing, no, I have to have that adult in me go, you know what? I'm going to take care of this little kid inside me and go, nope, we're done, And that was also a beautiful thing too, was to kind of see those soul compromises
Sure.
not being made anymore.
And that was the next question I was going to ask you is in your journey, what do you think the biggest lesson that you learned has been?
I think, again, like I said before, taking care of the journey is how much taking care of myself really is the number one thing. And I know that that can sound very, I was afraid that was going to be selfish, I
Oh,
that
yeah. And it's
no,
not.
it's not at all. At
Um,
all, because I'm not just doing it for me, I'm doing it for everyone else around me. The more I take care of myself, I can be present around my family, my friends, my dogs, and be there.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I think for me, one of the biggest things I learned, in addition to stillness, because I totally agree with you, was that I'm in more control than I thought I was. And, with anxiety, a lot of it is control, right? Feeling out of control. I think with a lot of mental health disorders, it's that lack of control. But when I really learned different like tools in my toolbox to get myself out of that anxiety, especially like in the moment when I'm having an attack, to learn that I can control that was life changing because I felt like I was sinking for a really long time and like this thing was going to pull me under. But realizing that I actually have more control over my brain, that I am not just my chemicals, was a really, really big deal for me.
Yeah, that's a huge deal, and I relate to that completely, because that control is, like, it's hard when you get so many things in your life. I mean, I've lost a lot of people, and I recognized that was contributing to a lot of my control. It's like, I love someone. My relationship with loving someone meant they were going to leave in
Hmm.
any capacity, whether they were going to die or they were going to leave for whatever reason. And for me, I think that I held on to things so tightly and was so afraid to, like, even especially things that didn't serve me. I was
Yeah.
still holding on because I was so afraid to lose that thing. And once I realized, like, hey, you're actually okay. You're never really alone. And actually holding on to this thing that's not serving you, or mulling over this death that happened or whatever, um is actually holding you back from that control, because you're giving up your control to something. One of the biggest things that, I love The Power of Now. I've read it so many times, and I love when he talked about it. Made me think of, actually, circling back to Breaking the Chains. It's a community based on, I mean, a lot of things, but a lot of artists are involved, right? And as artists, our imaginations, we tell stories. They're so profound. They're so vivid in our minds and in our bodies. They're so visceral. And, anxiety, Eckhart Tolle always says that it's, worrying about something that hasn't happened yet. You're looking into the future. You're worried about controlling something that isn't even in your reality right now. So of course it's going to give you anxiety because there's so many circumstantial things that can be, it's like, juggling tossed up in the air. It's so funny because I've thought about this as artists that, like, what do? We create, we imagine. Our imaginations are huge. And so the things that we can concoct in our minds are like, oh my gosh, like, it's like sometimes I have to go, hey, you have a beautiful imagination, but just shh.
Yeah, totally. That's really funny. I never even really thought about that as artists. Yeah, we are so imaginative. Okay, I have one final question for you. So, what is your advice to someone, maybe someone younger, who hasn't asked for help yet?
I would say to recognize that it is okay to ask for help and that it is essential for you to take that love and really give it back to yourself, that asking for help is the greatest form of love that
Mm.
you can give, especially if you feel like you can't help yourself in that moment. Because I think when we're young, we don't always have, especially with how our brains are developing, like we don't always have, we may feel like we're invincible. I know I did. I
Yeah.
thought I know everything, or at least a lot. And now looking back, I went, you just don't have that capacity. So I think understanding that, having enough humility to say, hey, like I'd like to be a student right now and I'd like to learn about myself, and however that comes, whether it's talking to someone else or just sitting in silence and knowing that everything is going to be okay. It's okay not to be okay. And sometimes it takes the not being okay and accepting that to actually be okay.
Totally. Yeah, that was beautiful. And I will just add to that, for a lot of my life, I felt like I had to get over my emotions. And I learned recently that I don't, I have to go through them. Yeah, I have to go through them. And when we just push it all and shove it under the rug and appear like we're fine, it's not going to take us very far. We're going to hit the roadblock. We're going to hit the rock bottom. So I want to encourage people who haven't asked for help yet to really move through their emotions and understand that feeling them is totally normal. We are all feeling them. Even the people who are pretending they're okay are feeling them. And if we can move through them, then we will just come out on the other side happier and more healed and more, like we've been talking about, in tune with ourselves and our self-love.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just want to say one thing, that our capacity for our emotions, the ones that a lot of times we try and shove down, like that's who we are. And that's what makes us unique. And that's what brings the world as a whole to be able to go fight for the things we need to fight for, or, change certain societal norms that are out there right now. It's our capacity to feel and our capacity to want to fight. And sometimes we get anxiety because we think, oh, I feel so much, but feeling that much is a beautiful thing. You're human. That means you're awake and you're alive and you're working properly. And I think to be robotic is not human. And so I think that's another thing that, to be able to accept that because I feel this, it's not a bad thing. Yeah, it might be overwhelming, but it means I'm actually working properly.
Yeah. And you are capable of feeling sad things and being okay.
Yeah, it's human and you're okay. Yeah. And it's what draws us all together. It's one thing we all go through is emotions, and grief and sadness and anxiety. At some point we're all going to hit it. And, you know, if we can share in it together, I think that we can really truly heal and create some really beautiful relationships and things in general.
I can't believe I made it through this whole conversation without crying.
I know, me too. I was like, what? But I think we're both so
When the
passionate about.
redheads unite, we are unstoppable.
Our hair's like the same color.
Same color.
I
Courtney,
love
this was so fun. Thank you for joining me for Mental Health Action Day. As always, so much love to you
love
and
to.
to our community. We love you guys. Thank you for supporting us. Breaking the Chains Foundation means so much to so many people. So thanks you guys for watching.
Yes, thank you so much. We love you all.